Hello everyone, welcome to the GeoEcologist. I am Dr. Krishnanand and you have been watching my videos on geography, environment and research methodology on my channel of late. So in this session on economic geography, we are going to learn about one of the very interesting topics that is related to the trade. So we say patterns of world trade. Now whenever we say patterns of world trade, it means basically what? It means that what kind of patterns on the global map can we observe in terms of the exports, imports and other trade related data. So basically we can look through the world map and think about which are the important poles in terms of trade, right? Which are the biggest units of trade across the world, which countries dominate, what is the relationship between developed and developing nations in terms of trade, which can be shown through a map. So geographical patterns of the world trade is what we are going to discuss in today's session. But before we go ahead, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and also share the videos with others as well. So now let's understand these geographical patterns of the world trade. In order to understand the geographical patterns of the world trade, the first important thing that is we need to understand is the various trade blocks in the world. Which are the important block areas of the world which contribute towards the major trade in that particular region. So the world has been divided on this map, if you can observe, into several regional trade blocks which does the maximum trading across the regions of the world. So if you look here from Americas, you'll have North American Free Trade Agreement, that is also called NAFTA, right? Then what you have is Central American Integration System, also earlier known as Central American Common Market System. Then you have Caribbean Community, Union of South American Nations. So in Americas, you have these trade blocks which operate or which handle the trade across different regions, right? Then if you look into Europe here, so European Union, remember EU in short we say is the most famous one. Then European Free Trade Agreement or Association is also there. Then we have Eurasian Economic Community, in which you must have heard Commonwealth of Independent States, the CIS region, right? The region that was created after the breaking up of USSR, right? Then further if you observe here, the Arab League, the African Union, which is clearly the northern and the Middle East here in African portion, and then further down south, the African Union. Then if you come to the Asia and Southeast Asia section, then the most famous one is the ASEAN, that is ASEAN, Free Trade Agreement Area, Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And then we have SAARC, which is South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, which is where India is one of the biggest contributors. And then we have the Pacific Island Forums, right, for the Australia and Oceania region, right? So these are the major areas of the world which handle trade. So if you look geographically, what do you see? The world is aligned in different regions according to these trade blocks. Now let's understand further more. So the pattern characteristics of world trade are the following points here, if you can observe. So trade is what? An exchange of goods and services between these countries, between these trading blocks. And goods brought into a country are called imports, and those sold to another country are called exports. This is the basic that you must already know. Then what happens here? Now there is a pattern emerging out of the developed and developing connotations. If you observe, developed countries, the first world countries, right, have greater share of global trade than the developing countries. What does it mean? That developed countries control virtually the entire trade across the world. So the pattern will look in a particular way. So usually what happens to the developed countries? The export valuable manufactured goods such as electronics, cars and other consumer goods to the developing countries, right? So what happens? Developing countries are virtually their markets for the developed ones, right? This is what is happening across the world. So if you look at the trading blocks such as European Union, which dominate the world exports, you'll find that the processed goods are exported to the across the world, right? That's where their major share lies. So greatest volume of trade occurs between the developed rich countries, especially very importantly, the industrial leaders such as, if you observe, Germany, Japan, United Kingdom, United States of America, and also now South Korea is the emerging one, right? So what you observe is these are the developed countries which virtually control the world trade, right? And if they control the world trade, you will find a significant geographical pattern emerging in terms of the outgoing and incoming, that is the export and import, which contributes to the world trade. That's important as a conceptual framework. Now let's understand through some graphs. What you observe here, it emphasizes that levels of dominance, right, developed countries still have in terms of exports. So if you observe the export data here, the percentage here, Europe, then you have North America, some portions of South and Central America, and also some areas of Asia. They dominate the world, right, in terms of trade. But now gradually, the other areas are also coming up. Now the development is going to the particular areas where now modern industrial setup and agglomeration factors are playing a role. So there is a evidence that developed countries' share is now gradually decreasing, right? So let's understand the theoretical basis of world trade also, because it may help you in understanding the background of it. So the world trade is governed by many theories that economists use in their inference to understand the world, right? So one of the important theory that you will come across is the David Ricardo's theory. Now this is also called Ricardian model of comparative advantage. So remember the comparative advantage theory. Now what do you mean by comparative advantage? That one area, one region or one trade bloc will have advantage over the other in terms of particular points. For example, labor, technology, natural resources, which are also called factors of production. It means what? The areas, the regions which will deal properly with these factors of production, which will agglomerate or aggregate these factors of production properly, they will benefit, right? So if you observe in modern context why China is leading in most of the exports and processing units, because it has the agglomeration of these factors, right? So what happens? Most of the goods are being produced in China's special economic zone, the East Coast, if you observe carefully. Right? So that's where you observe that China is leading the world charts and many production industrial units are there, right? So that's the primary driver of the world trade if you observe in today's scenario. That's where Ricardian model helps to understand the comparative advantage. So in emerging global order, if you observe in today's world, it's not just the earlier model that was developed by Ricardo and other scholars saying that only these particular factors dominate, but now there is a combination which is going on. So if you observe with multinational corporations and global communication technology, where information technology, internet revolution has played a pivotal role, what is happening? The headquarters are somewhere else and the production units are somewhere else. Outsourcing of businesses. This has created a significant change on the earlier era. If you observe the earlier industrialization where in locales, right, in particular blocks, in particular countries, there only we say in situ. But now after globalization, after this internet revolution, what is happening? The production centers are somewhere else and the decision makers are sitting somewhere else, right? The headquarters are somewhere else. This kind of development has taken up, and what has happened? The patterns of world trade are now changing to accommodate a range of these theories. So now the major modern and postmodern theories are questioning the boundary concept. Earlier, these industrial blocks, trading blocks were confined to countries, boundaries. But now they have become transnational, multinational, isn't it? These are the words we use to describe the world patterns of trade through these kind of institutions or establishments, right? So now if you observe, this question is here, which countries have the most trade agreements in the world? And this data is as of 2019 WTO. Look here, in this particular legend here in this map, what you can observe, the deeper blue. Where do you find the deeper blue? In these areas, Western Europe, the erstwhile city-states or mercantile states. Remember from where we derived our UN clause, right? We have learned in oceanography lectures also. So what you observe, this is still leading the charts. It means EU, right? And after that, we have NAFTA, then we have the Oceania, Association of Southeast Asian Nation Regions, and several other trading blocs. But what this data gives us is how much trade agreements do you commit in a year, right? So by 2019 August, observe the world pattern. It's clearly showing that African countries, some Middle Eastern countries, also some South American countries are actually in terms of very low. Rather, rest of the world, if you observe, including India, is aligned in the first or the second tier, right? So this is giving us a statistical analysis and giving us a world pattern of which areas in the world is dominating in world trade, right? In terms of maximum trade agreements they are doing, right? So what do you observe? Experts or people who research on these, or the economists or world traders, they believe that rapid growth markets, right now, which are rapid growth markets, will become even more dominant force in global trade over the coming decade. So the coming decade is going to be ruled by international relations, international economics, right? With Asia Pacific region set to experience the fastest growth of global trade by 2030. So now understand Asia Pacific, we say Indo-Pacific region, right? Association of Southeast Asian nations and also the Australasian region. Now this region is going to dominate the world according to all researchers. That's where it becomes more important for Indian Ocean, right? And when it becomes the Indian Ocean as a pivotal geographical location of the trade where maximum concentration is going to be in future, it's definitely very important for us as Indians, right? So China dominance is low cost manufactured goods. If you observe, what is China doing? Low cost production. That's where it's leading the chart. And it is going to gradually come down, right, with pressure coming from the other countries like Bangladesh, Vietnam and several other parts of Africa where newer establishments are coming up. Also, don't forget, China is investing in many of those countries. So that is another flip side to it. China is also doing this kind of investment in other African countries and controlling the trade not just from China, but also from the world around. So that's also one particular theory that's coming up. So let's see where the future is, but general trend that shows us the fastest growing trade route will be between India and China. So remember, Indian Ocean region is going to be very important. Indo-Pacific region is going to be very important. And some experts also believe that trade between China and India alone will account for 1/5 of global trade by 2030. Right? So the domination of NAFTA in EU, if you see, European Union, is going to fall down or is going to go down. The most important area, the heartland of modern world is going to be the Indo-Pacific region. That's being now assumed. Now, look into this particular map. It's again showing the inequalities in global trade. This is where the patterns emerge. That's what we're looking here, the patterns of global trade in terms of inequality. So where do you find the major bigger circles? You observe these areas, right? And what about the rest of the world? So it means there is a polarization, right, in terms of international trade. So food and beverages, industrial supplies, fuel and lubricants, capital goods, transport equipments, consumption goods and other necessary goods. These are the different categories. If you observe these graduate circles, right, and observe that where these are located. So it means this area and this area. So if you observe 1, 2 and 3 are going to be the major trade blocks which have the imports and exports going on between them. This is what is world trade pattern, right? So further, what you observe is the current trends and challenges in global economy in terms of trade. Hyper-globalization, if you have observed this word, rapid rise in trade integration, right? Then dematerialization of globalization, it means the importance of services, not just goods here, right? Then democratic globalization, it means widespread embrace of the openness, not the closed door economies, but open door economies, right? More openness, more transparency in the policies. Then further, the crisscrossing globalization is another terminology being used. The similarity of north to south trade and investment flows which flows in other direction as well, right? So developing and developed countries trading as well as developed and developing alliances. So multiple numerous alliances coming into the picture which is crisscrossing, right? It's like a web. It's not just one way, right? Then rise of mega trader like China, if you observe, since the first imperial wave of British, right? Now China is kind of a world leader in terms of trade if you observe, because Chinese goods are being sold through European Union, through US, in the African countries, in Indo-Pacific. So China through its manufacturing at low cost is actually dealing the world like a world trader or a mega trader, right? Then proliferation of regional trade agreements as we have looked in the previous map also, and decline of barriers to trade in goods. This is what is happening in current times. So what are the challenges to maintain all this? Right? If these things are happening, it means as a state, as a country, we also need to buck up and participate and progress, right? That's what is important here. Now, so what is the way forward? Going forward, the trading system will have to tackle 3 fundamental challenges. If you observe in next decade and times to come, 3 fundamental challenges are going to be. The first is in developed countries, the domestic support of globalization needs to be sustained in face of economic weakness and reduced ability to maintain social insurance mechanism, right? So they also need to work out on this aspect, the developed countries. The second important challenge is China has become the world's largest trader and major beneficiary of the current rules of game. So what can happen? it will be called upon to shoulder more of the responsibilities of maintaining an open system. So it's China's responsibility, as you understand, with more power and more concentration, more responsibility. So is China going to maintain that? That's a question which future will tell the answer. And the third challenge will be to prevent the rise of mega regionalism from leading to discrimination and becoming a source of trade conflicts. Now remember, history gives us some kind of clues. Ever in history, when these kind of concentration happened in one part of the world, where rise of mega regionalism happened, it created world conflicts. So new world conflicts are not going to be war conflicts, but trade conflicts, economic warfare. That's what we are looking into future. So this needs to be tackled properly. So this is where we're looking into the future in terms of the world patterns or geographical patterns of the world trade. So now, when we have understood in details the various aspects of the geographical patterns of world trade and several other aspects, in the sessions to come, we'll be talking more on different other aspects of geography, environment. So stay tuned, stay safe, keep watching and sharing the videos, and all the best wishes for your exams.